Welcome to the Neural Talks, your gateway to the forefront of AI innovation. I'm your host, Ranjit Malarkot, and together we'll explore the AI revolution with the brightest minds pushing boundaries and shaping the future. Through candid conversations, they share hard-won insights as we unlock the transformative power of AI. Get informed, get inspired. This is the future, and you're in the front row. And welcoming to this episode of Neural Talks, we have Girish Venkatramani joining us from the other side of the world, from California, to talk about high-performing AI cultures. Girish, so excited to have you and really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Ranjit. Great to be here and great to be talking to you. I'm really excited about what you're doing with the Neural, and I'm so glad that you have me on the program today.
Girish, you have a really rich history in AI. You've been working to sort of apply AI in a variety of different fields, and of course, your most recent being that from Cruise, an autonomous industry leader, where you've been heading an engineering team. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so I've come to the field of AI from one of the foundational computer science fields of compilers, right? So I've been a compiler engineer prior to the AI surge. So around 10 years back, when AI really started to come into the mainstream, I started by building. I realized that compilers was going to play a major role because the compute for AI is so heavy. You need the best optimizations you can. So that's where I came into the world of AI. I built compilers at MathWorks, where I was working back then, and then I moved to NVIDIA and led their deep learning compiler team. And then I really wanted to work in a company where I could see the end-to-end product and not just build an AI model or a compiler and have the world play with it, but an end-to-end product where my skills and expertise could play a major role. So I've always been very interested and attracted to autonomous driving. And so I joined Cruise. And I had the fortune and pleasure of working there for 5 years. And my most recent role was as a senior director of AI Foundation. So that is basically the entire ML infra and deployment and data platforms that are needed to productionize AI models. I recently quit Cruise, and I'm in the transition to move on to my next gig.
Fantastic, and wishing you the best for your next gig. And I'm pretty sure you're going to do great work there as well. So, Girish, you've worked in very interesting companies. I mean, MathWork, NVIDIA, Cruise, and of course your next gig, which will no doubt be in another AI company. I'm thinking. So you've been exposed to a variety of different cultures. You've been exposed to a variety of different teams, working models. Wanted to quickly check in with you and get your thoughts on what do you think is the role that culture plays in these high-performing, cutting-edge AI organizations that are sort of inventing and pushing boundaries and inventing the future. Give us your perspective on that a little, please.
Yeah, I get very excited when I start talking about culture because it is such a underrated aspect of working together in building complex technology. This is especially true in the era of AI. This is because, like if you in the past, like when you would build products and solutions, you could have pretty well kind of separated out teams as platform teams, as product teams, and you could kind of set their focus towards their goals. In AI, though, that paradigm changes a bit. AI is so complex. We're building a very complex systems. There are ML teams that are building these models, creating new model architectures, trying out different things, and they need to iterate fast. They need to kind of try out different solutions, maybe train with more data, maybe change the model architecture some, and really kind of iterate through the model building process to arrive at the right solution. And this means that you need to also work very closely with an infrastructure team that provides the data platform, that provides the training platforms, that can optimize your inference serving platform. And so building an AI product and solution requires an entire village to come together to create something of great value. And so when you have such a paradigm, you need to be thinking about how these teams are working together, because in the end of the day, they are still people who are building these technologies. And when people come together, culture is a very important piece of that.
No, those are great points, Girish. I mean, totally get that. I mean, you're building really complex systems. There are so many disparate teams. All of them have to sync fast and sync right. At the same time, you're developing a product that's actually sort of going out in the autonomous industries, going out into the real world. There are risks and compliance and lives at stake. So a lot more that actually goes into this. So we get it. I mean, culture definitely, from what we're hearing, is really important. So let me sort of step back a little bit, right? So in an organization, there is the overall organizational culture, and then if there's a large tech team, there's a tech culture. Is there necessarily a difference you feel between these, or do you believe that this culture is uniform across? What is your view on that?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and we can spend a long time kind of breaking that down. In the end of the day, I think there's a lot of commonalities for sure, right? Like we can talk about organizational culture, which allows for a level of openness, transparency, great communication, psychological safety, all the tenets, the basic tenets that go into creating an organization that you want to be working with. On the tech culture side, I think the main differentiation is that with AI velocity is going to be very important. Velocity and accountability. The world is moving really fast, right? Like especially in the AI world, the bleeding edge is moving faster than I've ever seen it in a pre-AI world. So you got to keep up with the state of art, but also you got to be able to build new models, build new solutions, deploy them at a clip that your business requires. So velocity and accountability are two major differentiators in the AI world. So culture goes a long way in kind of creating the affordances that enable us to accelerate our velocity and ensure that the teams are working synergistically and not in their own silos.
Wow. Okay. So that's something to digest. So when you look at tech culture, and you mentioned velocity and you mentioned accountability,
Mhm.
so what are the other tenets that go as part of this tech culture that sort of help you produce this velocity as an outcome, produce these high quality, complex products that are built on a non-deterministic, probabilistic world, right? I mean, in a
Yeah.
deterministic world, it's much easier, but in a probabilistic world, building products is far more difficult. So, what do you think are the tenets of the tech culture that sort of help you enable building, these products?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We can start with, like I said, the basic tenets of a good culture. For me, starts with empowering people. Like empowerment is a big part of a high performing team. Psychological safety, being able to say that we are walking down the wrong path or the solution is not going to work, and being able to say that with a level of psychological safety is also very important. And then transparency and communication, because in my experience, building high-end AI solutions requires this like almost like a layered level of decision making, which goes into kind of creating that final product, not only from the technology perspective, but also from the business and, as you said, safety and compliance perspective. So having the teams being able to understand these decisions, providing that level of transparency and open communication, these are all the basic tenets that I think go into that culture. But then on top of that, because velocity, accountability are going to be so important, we need to make sure that teams are working on things that create value. Now, you do need structure, you do need processes, but you want to keep that as low touch as possible. So having a building agile and low agile engineering processes with low overhead in terms of communication reporting is going to be a big thing. I've seen the impact of not doing this right and how it can drag teams down, because they want to be building stuff and they don't want to be trapped in some kind of bureaucracy. Open collaboration, as I said, there are platform teams, there are infra teams, there are ML teams, there are safety and compliance teams, there are product teams. And when you build a solution, especially like from my experience at Cruise, at Cruise, for example, there is one product that the whole company is working towards, which is building the self-driving car. And so open collaboration implies that there is a way that we can actually work together synergistically to find the right stride between our teams, the right communication touch points, the right execution forums, and not have it be a high overhead. This is a hard thing to kind of work out, because the spread, the net that brings these teams together through AI is large. So there is obviously going to be some level of friction. So how can you create that environment of open collaboration? And finally, as I said earlier, objective and transparent decision making in terms of why we are going down one path versus another is going to be really important. And finally, this is probably the most important. As I said, the state of art is moving at a clip that I've never seen before. Things are evolving by the year. For example, convolutional networks were the biggest thing when AI surged 10 years back into the mainstream. And everybody thought for the first 5-6 years that this was like the biggest breakthrough. Now, transformers have taken over. Nobody uses convolutional nets anymore. The state of art keeps moving and moves really fast. So how can your engineers and your engineering teams stay on top of the state of art? How can they share knowledge and make sure that the team understands where things are moving and how they can innovate in the state of art? So creating an environment which allows for an agile engineering process with low overhead, open collaboration, transparency, and knowledge sharing. These are all what creates the right culture for building a high-performing AI team.
Wow. Okay. That's, I mean, I think you've sort of lived it and you've sort of very, lucidly laid it out for us. Thanks for that. So you spoke about collaboration, communication a lot. We gather it's all within the organization, within your teams. So in the ecosystem in which you're operating, Girish, is there collaboration within the AV ecosystem or in the Bay Area? Are there collaborations that happen outside of your company into other areas from which the state of the art flows in, or you're able to help somebody else outside? Is that something that's actually pretty prevalent, or how does it work there?
Oh yeah, this is. I mean, today, I mean, in the world of in the open source world, this is very much a big part of it. A lot of technology that my teams have built are standing on the shoulders of open source technology out there. We want to be able to even contribute back to the open source. So through open source technologies, we've seen a strong level of collaboration. Like my teams have had a lot of conversations with teams from Google or other companies in, for example, ensuring that we are all working towards collectively building compiler technology for ML that can bring value to everybody. So it is very much a big part of today's AI world is the necessity to collaborate. Now, of course, through open source projects and repos, we know like there is a lot of collaboration that happens. There are all these foundations which even further encourage that. But there's also a lot of informal collaboration that happens through different meetups and forums that, especially a lot of startups I've seen encouraging people to come together so that they can actually have these conversations. Being in cruise, AV industry tends to be quite secretive. So we didn't have that extent of open collaboration with the industry or academia. But that's just an exception in this case. What I have seen in the AI world is that like high levels of knowledge sharing and collaboration across companies is just a norm through conferences, meetups, knowledge forums, open source repos, and foundations like like the Linux Foundation or LLVM Foundation and so on. There are many different open source foundations which have encouraged that level of collaboration and have created value, which many companies are leveraging just as we speak.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a very, very vast ecosystem that's sort of linking and helping each other out and sort of like making sure that the space that you earlier spoke about, the space of models coming out, the space of state of the art, coming out. I think it's enabled with a larger ecosystem working together. And of course, I mean, at the Neural, that's one of the things that we're hoping to also sort of like build, and hoping that will actually accelerate the pace of startups and many other organizations adopting, scaling, and applying AI.
Yeah.
But
And I'm really happy that you're doing this in India. I think it's a very necessary step function change that needs to happen and create that space for that level of collaboration.
Stepping back a little bit, Girish, I know we spoke about organization culture. I know we spoke about tech culture, right? Um, I'm going to sort of take a little step back so that we put the entire business in context and then sort of see as to how all this changes just a little bit, because all these things are important. I think any work that you're doing, even if it's in a compiling, if it's in the space of compilers, or if it's in the space of actually, a car that's going out, I think it all comes into the business space. So talking about the business, how is the business problem statement sort of defined in the AV industry? How do they chalk out and sort of say that this is how we're going to be expanding, this is where our cars are going to be going, and then how do those then sort of translate for the tech team, right? I'm more interested in understanding as to how these business goals sort of tie in, to the tech team, and then the culture sort of enables all this to happen. So that's really what I'm hoping, that you'll throw some light on.
In the AV industry, this is especially interesting because it's a fully vertically integrated solution.
Correct.
All the way from the vehicle, all the way to the ML software stack that runs in the car is usually developed by AV companies. So right now, the companies like Cruise, Waymo, Neuro, and a bunch of others in the US are called L4 AV companies. So L4 is a level of autonomy, and it really just means that there is no human in the driver's seat. So the AV should be able to handle every type of situation that it comes across, and there is no human to take over. So now take the question of what is the business goal. Let's talk about a revenue target, which typically is what the business cares about. And the product for these L4 companies today is ride hail. So ride hail is like your Uber or Ola service in India. And it is completely autonomous, and the fleet is managed by the AV company typically. So once you set a revenue target and you look at your pricing model, you have some notion of dollar per mile, which you can think about, which kind of then translates from the revenue target to the number of miles you should be driving or your fleet should be driving. So once you have that number of miles your fleet should be driving, you can now think about how can I deploy my AVs in order to realize that many miles. Now, this is where the complexity gets a little murky because you can't just drop thousands of AVs in the center of San Francisco. If you just did that, let's say there's some
Or in,
problem
or in Mumbai.
or in
Or
Mumbai,
in the
exactly.
middle of Mumbai.
Exactly, or in Mumbai. Exactly. So you got to be very deliberate about knowing that the technology that's driving the car is capable of handling every type of situation. Every city is different. Every neighborhood is different. You might see things in one neighborhood which your AI technology is not yet capable of handling. So you can start to what we call geofence where you're driving. So when you start to geofence, you're picking an area of the market where you feel comfortable and you have evidence through data that your AVs will perform at a high level of reliability and safety, and that you can put your trust behind that. Now, for example, like things that you might see. For example, you might have like a big railroad crossing in one part of the city. How well does your software technology deal with that? Do you know how to stop? What happens if you get stuck on the railroad, right? Like you need to be able to ensure that you are safe in driving across that. So a geofence might start with not including the railroad tracks until the AI teams can actually solve that problem. Another example that we've seen is like, when we were driving in San Francisco, we have to always know that there is emergency vehicles, whether it's police cars or fire trucks or whatever. We need to be able to identify them and give them way. Now, when you move to Texas, cops are on horses, so we need to know that cops on horses are emergency vehicles of some kind. So there is always these nuances that you need to be you need to ensure that your vehicles can handle. So when you start to think about those miles you have to drive, you have to think about what kind of scenarios and situations that you might encounter in these particular geofences. And if you do not feel that the AV is capable of that, that becomes the tech problem that the engineering teams need to solve. And so you iteratively work through that with the product ops and engineering team to kind of create a solution that can realize those miles that generate that revenue.
No, this is really fascinating. And for somebody from a non-AV background, and I think this is actually really blowing, my mind, their mind a little bit, because the complexities of the nature of this business and the nature of where and how your tech is deployed and used is really sort of stretching the boundaries in terms of the situations and the events that it has to handle, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
practically any event and any situation. Honestly, for somebody from a non-AV background, what you're saying right now is really blowing my mind and possibly the minds of the viewers that are actually, watching this video. So on that thread, a lot of the AI ML applications that are currently happening in the enterprise space and the SMB space today on in the context of digital forefronts, e-commerce. So they typically involve customer churn, fraud prediction, inventory optimization. But given the nature of what happens in the AV industry, right, and given the situations and the events that the AV has to sort of handle, and the probabilistic nature of what you're building, how does this complicate what you're building and how the teams are actually looking at it?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest problems that AV companies are trying to solve. Yes, I mean, let's first of all let's accept it. If you're building AI, you're going to have non-determinism, right? There is a probabilistic nature to it. You cannot avoid it. You have to accept it. You have to accept it and figure out how you're going to deal with it in a product level. So in the end of the day, there is going to be a level of non-determinism, a level of unknowns. So that is where the idea of safety critical systems come in, and that's kind of how the AV companies deal with it. It's not a new idea. I mean, safety critical systems has been around for a while. Like the airline industry cares a lot about it, and many other. There's in fact like regulations and standards around it as well. So safety critical systems, yes. But in the AV context, it's just that much harder. When you think about typical safety critical systems, you are typically considering the idea that you have like some software which is running on some hardware, and that if there is a failure in any part of your system, that the whole thing doesn't come down crashing, right? That you cannot have a single point of failure or even a double point of failure. Typically, you look for some probabilistic statistical way of ensuring that your level of safety reliability is pretty high by building like, what they call the Swiss cheese model. So Swiss cheese, like you take a slice of cheese, there's holes in it. But if you layer a number of slices together, you have a pretty compact system. You don't have holes in it. So you're kind of having redundancy in the system in many different ways. Traditionally, safety critical was all about hardware redundancy because hardware was what would go down. But with AI system, even software is a big part of it. So you need to have that level of redundancy where you have a backup kind of a mode. You need to be able to detect that something is not working well. And that's just on the safety side. What the AV companies have realized is that's not sufficient. In fact, it may not be a safety problem, but it might be a huge public nuisance if, for example, the AV gets stuck in the middle of the road. It's not creating an accident, but it's a huge annoyance for traffic. And that is not desirable either. So you need to be thinking about, is my AI system dysfunctioning in a way that is either causing a safety incident or a public nuisance incident, or rather, let's put it this way: like it's doing something non-human like, right? Like we want it to kind of behave like a well, very attentive human, right? Like we want to, like a human driver, the best human drivers we want it to emulate. But if it's doing something different, it creates a level of doubt in people's mind. And that's where the complexity of AV comes in. AI models can do some things which actually could be fine, but be construed differently by the public, and that could really cause a big impact on the brand image of this company.
No, absolutely. I think you hit the nail, head on. And I was just, as you were talking, I was just thinking about all the situations, right? I mean, you mentioned a very important point. You're building software which has to feel to the person in the car as though it's a driver. So if there's a sudden, acceleration, there's a sudden jerk, or
Yep.
if there's a signal from a driver nearby, and this system is not interpreting it, then it feels like there's nobody in the car. There's a sense of anxiety. There's a sense of panic that can set in. So
Exactly.
there's so much that needs to sort of be thought of to sort of
Yep.
bring all these things together. And in fact, there was this anecdote that was out there on YouTube, right? There was this AV driving through the roads in the US, and there was this emergency vehicle on the opposite side, and the police, and it was a very narrow street, so the policeman was actually walking in front of it, requesting for the car to move to the side. And the passengers were sort of clueless, and the policeman was clueless to what's happening next. But yeah, I mean, we get it. I mean, your world is
Yep.
complex. And we understand that this deterministic, non-deterministic system makes it far more, increases the complexity.
Yep.
But on that note, right, to handle this complexity, right, if you were to look at, the team structure in tech to sort of, to build this highly complex product, in terms of how they sort of structured in a generic AV industry, is it vastly different from, from other tech industries, or what would you think it looks like?
I don't think it is vastly different per se. I think any enterprise or company that is building, complex AI systems need a research team who is looking at the right models to develop, whether it's from the state of art or innovating on their own. The ML teams, which are productionizing those models, making sure that it is training them on swaths of data, and building the right model architectures which they can stand behind. You need an infra team, which is providing the services, the platforms, and infrastructure needed, primarily on the data side to make sure that you're using the right data to train your models, but also ensuring that you have efficient training platforms, because let's face it, building AI is very expensive. Like using the cloud resources is super expensive. So you want to make sure that you're getting the most for your dollar. And then, of course, that is all of the building the solution. And then there is like the test simulation validation teams who are now building these offline simulation models and testing models to make sure that any new changes to your system is only making things better and it's not regressing stuff. And then finally, there's safety teams, which is then trying to assess the value and the metrics in a way that they can say, yes, this is good to go. So that's usually the structure of what I've seen in AV industry, but it's not that uncommon. Even in companies that are building AI, probably you might not have the safety teams if compliance is not a big deal for you, but you definitely need a research team, the ML teams, infra teams, and testing and validation team.
So Girish, we spoke about, culture, we spoke about structure a little bit. And, we have this complex problem, and we have this real world environment, which is, changing every second or even faster than that. So in this structure with so many people in it, so how does the process and the how does the workflow go about? The reason I'm asking is because in the digital world, in the e-commerce or the enterprise SMB worlds, we use agile, Scrum, and the usual process to sort of sync up. So just want to give the audience a flavor of whether it's the same or you have different processes. So just getting a flavor of that.
Yeah, I think of agile as being orthogonal to whether you're building an AI system or a digital solution, like you were saying, digital enterprise solution. Agile is just ensuring that you're working at a velocity that you can actually track and ensure that especially when you're collaborating across teams, there is like that synergy, right? So obviously, I am a big believer in agile, and I think it is important for big problems that the engineering team is solving to be broken down into smaller bite-sized chunks, which you're solving through a sprint in your agile process, right? So that's actually very important. You need to have, of course, as part of agile, you want to have CI/CD process, which is also really resilient and is growing, in a way that is it's growing in a way that is kind of countering the complexity of the software itself, because software gets more and more complex. Is it just like, is your CI/CD like is your test suite
Correct.
just growing? That's a big question. So how do you make sure that you're still able to stay nimble while making sure you're testing the right things? Building an offline platform is going to be important for that. And of course, you have the usual kind of planning and execution processes. You want to kind of plan for a time horizon, set the goals, break that down into what each of the teams need to deliver, have the right collaboration touch points, execution forums for tracking it, and ensuring that you can deliver the solution. Now, of course, part of this is also, since the technology itself is complex, you want to encourage more dialogue on the technology side. And that's where I talk about these knowledge sharing forums tech talks. In my teams, we even had like an external speaker forum. We'd love to get like people from outside our company to come and talk about what they're working on, because that exchange of ideas, it helps us get diversity in terms of what we are thinking about. So being able to share knowledge and stay with the state of art requires its own kind of thought and deliberate, conscious forums that you need to create to enable that. So with that, then you have like the knowledge sharing forums, and you talk about things like strategy forums. Okay, I have this big problem to solve. How am I going to solve it? The business has given me this problem. I need to be able to drive in these areas which have these kind of challenges and difficulties. Well, a strategy session should be talking about the solutions to solve that problem. What kind of models I might build? How long will it take? What's the risk? What's the unknowns in kind of taking this solution? What are the alternatives? What's the best route we can take? And that requires that collaborative decision making as well, which kind of makes sure that you're in it together and you're not afraid of failing. That is another thing that I think we all need to accept. There is no such thing as failure. I think it's always learning, right? Like you try something, you learn from it, you hopefully don't repeat that mistake in the future. But big part of this is that you have the right you have the right structure to be able to get the earliest signal that something is not going to work, and you're not sinking your investment in that work stream and pivot too late. So the ability to take on ambiguous problems, drive it down into deterministic chunks that each team will be executing on, and your ability to burn down unknowns, burn down risks in a timely manner, and together agree to move towards a solution or pivot to a solution if something is not working. Creating that environment is part of the engineering culture there.
No, that's great. I mean, that's a very detailed and well broken out, a structure and the processes and the way information flows, Girish. So I think you said you tackle the risk head on. You say that this is non-deterministic, and then you sort of break it down into chunks that are more palatable. And then you have an open culture that sort of helps you sort of build and at the same time sort of exchange information. You make sure that the information keeps flowing and the early signals of things going wrong, tracked, and then this collaboration outside with the ecosystem. Many valuable points that you've just sort of laid out there for us. But an interesting point you mentioned, right? I mean, there's this complexity of the system, and then these complexity of the surrounding systems around it, right? I mean, so when you're deploying this central system, and then you have these CI/CD systems, the infrastructure provisioning systems, you have many other systems that are around it. Now, question to you: does one always go out and build everything? Because I remember you spoke about open source earlier. Do you buy stuff? Is open source adoption, giving back, does that still work? How do you view this?
Oh, it's a constant question, there is no right or wrong solution. You have to be open to buying technology that fits well. And, when it doesn't, you have to be open to kind of investing to build it on your own. Now, there are many things that go into what is the right option, and it'll depend on the context of what you're building and what is the state of art out there. Now, in my experience, there have been technologies that we wanted to build, but the open source world hadn't had a good enough and reliable solution at that moment. And so we would have to kind of, we need to move fast. We need that solution today. The open source world might be delivering this in like 6 months or a year, whatever it is. So we need to build that for us. And sometimes, even if there is an open source solution, there might be some critical specific features that we might need that is not offered there, and it's the deal breaker sometimes. And so you might need to customize that solution on your own. Some open source solutions allow you to do that level of customization. Sometimes it doesn't work out, you build your own. And then there is also, and the opposite is also true. I've also had worked on projects where the open source technology has been really good, and we leverage that. We basically we basically use those open source repos and even upstream to it any changes and innovations that we bring in. So it's actually kind of shared with the community. So it's a very it's really a case by case basis. Some things that I've experienced myself, which can be something to think about, especially when there is not such a good solution out there. You might build something, but then 2 years later, the solution is really good in the open source on the commercial world, and you really want to adopt it. But there might be a big cost of migration to move to the open source world, which could disrupt your engineering velocity. So that is something to keep in mind. Like if you're building something from the ground up for your enterprise, for your company, make sure that you're building it in a way that you can pull the rug from under your feet without the whole house breaking down, basically.
Wow. Okay. Another another set of mind blown, scenarios happening in my head. Um, so wanted to sort of again, use this moment to sort of contrast, with your experience, Girish. For many of the viewers that are coming in from the digital and e-commerce backgrounds, um, specific to the AI cycle, right? Specific to the AI cycle and building AI products, is there something that you think stands out in terms of culture, processes, information flow, that might actually be something that they should pay attention to?
I think we've talked about it. I think we talked about a lot of these differences, which I mentioned, like, the high level of complexity requires a high level of collaboration, and that collaboration extends out beyond your own company. You need to be exposed and in sync with the state of art. This is a lesson that we learn again and again, and you got to be open to risk. You got to be open to ambiguity, and you just need to build a system that can deal with that while still creating a reliable and resilient system. The processes we've already talked about: transparency, psychological safety, empowerment, agile engineering processes, and I think once you have that kind of highly collaborative environment, your teams will be super motivated to kind of come in every day and do the best work of their lives. This is kind of something that I've seen myself, and we can get it wrong too, and it kind of demotivates them as well. So it is just like a self-serving synergistic cycle. The more you can jump in with both feet with these tenets of building that culture, the value you're going to get from it is will go beyond your imagination.
I'm sure of it, no doubt on that. So we spoke about culture, processes, information flow. We spoke about the complexity of the business. We spoke about the customer. We spoke about the environment in which this operates. Is that it? Is there anything more that you want to sort of like leave on the table? Or are you all done?
Well, I can talk about one thing, which I think is very important, which you didn't bring up, but I will touch upon it, is the question of technical debt. Tech debt is something every engineer cares about, right? Like if you don't care about it, then you're not an engineer. So
and all the managers don't want to talk about it, and we
exactly.
pay into it. Yeah.
Exactly. So tech debt is a very interesting thing, and when you ask different people's perspectives on it, you'll get 20 different answers, right? Like, and from a purist perspective, I've seen so many engineers say, like, we have to burn down all of technical debt. All our tech debt we should focus on it. We should We should even take time to burn that down, not make sure that we are accumulating it, and so on. And then on the other extreme, you can have the business needing the teams to move at a pace that is so fast that you're constantly building hacks and hot fixes and so on. So you're accumulating tech debt with every release. In fact, most of your solution is tech debt. I've seen that too, right? Like those are the two extremes. Now, the reality is, if you're building software and you want to move fast, you've got to you got to carry some debt. You got to carry some tech debt. It's just like a company, right? Like you want to carry some level of debt. And it's the same with technology too. If you're burning down every little hack and every little tech debt, that actually will slow you down and you might not meet your business goals. But having a process which is kind of firm in terms of what is allowable and what is not, the amount of tech debt that gets into each release, what is it that you can tolerate, and what is it that you know that you can work on through your backlog to ensure that you are constantly burning it down. Are you tracking it? Are you measuring it? Are you making sure that your teams are incentivized to burn down that tech debt? Usually they're not, right? Like, because usually the impact to the business is what matters to most of the leaders and the managers. But you really need to create a system by which you are incentivizing your engineers to burn down tech debt as they're creating this impact. So I think it's a very important concept that typically gets lost a lot in these conversations. So I just wanted to bring it out there.
So, Girish, we take your points. These are incredibly important, tenets for building an organization for business and for tech. And with that, tech debt will definitely, take you on as another topic in our podcast. So we line that up and make sure that Neural doesn't forget about tech debt. Your mission is
Right.
accomplished. So
You can
before we
carry
come to the
that as your debt for right now.
absolutely, that's the tech debt at Neural right now, and we will try and see how to actually get that closed off our list. So
Absolutely.
before we come to this very to the end of this very enjoyable and very informative podcast, Girish, I ask a couple of questions to our guests. So with your permission, question number one: what do you think in the next 5 to 10 years in the world of AI is not going to change?
What is not going to change? It's a great question. I don't know, man. Like AI is changing so fast. It's hard to imagine a world in 10 years. I think what might not change is still this idea of connecting, having the structure by which you understand your business goals, the tech goals. How do you kind of uh, grow from the community out there and build solutions for it? That basic tenet is probably going to require, it's not going to change too much. What is going to change a lot, in fact, right? Like today we have Gen AI, writing code for us, right? How far can we push that? I mean, we also know that it can create models. Today, those models are not as good or efficient as like models created by our greatest talent, but that could change too. We don't know. The world of Gen AI is moving at a pace where I don't know if I say something of what might not change, I might have my foot in my mouth in 10 years.
Don't worry about it. We're not going to hold you accountable to it, but we just wanted to get your views. But totally with you on the world of Gen AI and how it's actually changing, applied AI in business, and that's another series that we're coming up with on the Neural Talks. But Girish Venkatramani, it's been an absolute pleasure. I have learned so much from this podcast of spending 45 minutes with you, and I do hope that the viewers tuning in have gained as much and more to sort of help them shape their thoughts, scale in their minds and sort of apply these concepts to help AI augment their potential. It's been such a pleasure having you, Girish.
Thank you so much, Ranjit. I enjoyed it just as much. And thank you for having me on your podcast. And I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope your viewers and listeners will too. And let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. On that note, we will catch up with Girish on another podcast very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ranjit. Take care.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Neural Talks. Hit subscribe or follow us on LinkedIn to stay informed of many more great episodes on AI coming up. We're the Neural, where humans meet AI.